Hey there, class. Before I get started with Module 1, I just want to give you a real brief background on these videos themselves. Anytime that I teach a literature class, the majority of time is going to be spent, of course, talking about the literature. However, what I try to do in these mini lessons is just offer to you some background on the historical time period or the literary movement that the author is writing in so that you can have a better understanding of this before we begin to talk about the theme, the characters, the setting, all the other literary elements that we're going to discuss. Reason why I do that, anytime that an author writes, the author is writing the world that he or she sees. One of the reasons that I love literature so much and that I've been drawn to it my whole life is that I feel that literature gives us this glimpse into parts of a society or a historical time period that we normally wouldn't be able to see. We learn historical events and we learn the facts of those events, but what we don't really learn too much about is the people during that time frame or what the reaction would have been if we lived in society during that time period. What literature does for us is it gives us a glimpse into individuals that experience those moments or were part of that change, or their concerns that they had, the challenges that they faced. And we are able to, I think, gain a better appreciation and understanding of these historical periods when we see even fictional people overcome the obstacles that they overcame. So anytime that we start talking about literature, I think it's really important to put it in the time frame in which it was written so that we can gain not just a better understanding of the author or the author's theme, but how the author is portraying society and even the judgment that the author puts on society. So we're going to talk a lot more about that in class discussions, but you're going to see these videos posted really anytime we start a new module for sure, but also anytime there's a new literary movement, if there's an author that we're going to be talking about for several weeks, or if there's an event or even that time frame that we're going to be looking at through several different stories. I try to offer just a brief lesson, nothing lengthy, but a lot of times this will overlap with your textbook, so I encourage you to, of course, not just read the stories that are assigned to you, but any sort of introduction or background that the author gives in the textbook, and then class notes that I post. So throughout modules, you'll see the folders labeled. You'll want to read those as well, and then I'd encourage you to just watch these videos so that when you begin to work on the discussions, you have this time frame in mind. So hopefully that clears that up. So let me go ahead and get started then with Module 1. So Module 1 focuses on the Gilded Age in America. If you've read through the textbook, then some of this will be familiar to you, but the Gilded Age in America gets its name from a Mark Twain novel, and we read Mark Twain this first week. Gilded, of course, meaning the Golden Age. So historically, the Gilded Age follows the end of the Civil War in the United States. So as you know from your history classes, at the end of the Civil War, the United States had a lot of rebuilding to do. Of course, in addition to the many lives lost, farms were destroyed, factories were destroyed, people were displaced. There was almost this sense of there's so much to do at once that I can imagine that it was very overwhelming for the people. But what it also offered was this hope to them that America is going to rebuild, and this time it's going to rebuild better. There's going to be better factories, better farms. Slavery is no longer legal. So these individuals are promised better lives. And there became this moment of just hope for our country that this time around we're going to emerge. We might be down now, but when we finish, we're going to be better and we're going to be stronger. And there was also this underlying wanting to become a world power, because in Europe there was already an industrial movement that has been moving forward for quite some time. So now we were playing not just catch up from the Civil War, but we were wanting to put ourselves in a place where we were seen as this strong world leader. So through that, there was quite a few changes in our country. First of all, there was an extreme time of wealth. And you probably, if you have read anything from the late 1800s, early 1900s, or even watched any show set in that time period, watched any movies from that time period, then you were introduced to this idea of just incredible wealth in our country, which was true. There was incredible wealth when it came to the railroad industry, when it came to building up the factories and the industrial movement. And the stock market grew. There was this time where people were very successful in our country. But there was also a great divide in our country of poverty. And that was one of the main struggles that people had in the Gilded Age, was there was almost no middle. There was this incredible wealth and this incredible struggle. And many of our authors talk about that in their story. And they look at the incredibly wealthy and they pass this judgment on them as almost their lives as frivolous. And then the struggles of the people here that are trying to find work, trying to rebuild, and not having the same success as the upper class in our country at that time. One of the other challenges of the Gilded Age was the idea of this urban development. So, of course, following the Civil War with the displaced individuals, so many of them were looking for places to start a new life. So prior to that, although we always had big cities, they were never as huge as they were during this Gilded Age movement. So many people were moving into New York City. The stock market was exploding. They're going to move into the New York City area. So many people were moving where factories were being built, which were in these cities. So there was this influx of people that these areas just honestly weren't exactly ready for. So there was these challenges of not just what are we going to do with all these new people, but how are all these people going to have jobs? And more important, how are those of us that have lived here for so long, how are we going to handle being introduced to all these new ways of life? And how will those people that have never lived in these big cities before adapt to living? And that's another major theme that you see in writing during the Gilded Age, is just this urbanization of America. The third theme that you're going to see quite often is the idea of immigration. So the early 1900s, of course, was this time period where we had a surge of immigration. Many people, of course, from Europe, Eastern Europe area came over, especially with that overlap of the urbanization. They now saw this opportunity of, gosh, the industry is growing in the U.S. as well. Look at all the success that we're seeing. There's jobs, there's education there. We're going to go. And where that challenge became for those here present was all of these new cultures at once. How can they welcome people? And also there was this fear of all these people coming over. And then, of course, for those that came to establish a new life, learning a new language, learning a new culture, but still trying to keep what was so important to them and their own fear about being a part of this new country. So we see that a lot in these writings, both sides of it. We see immigrants writing on their point of views of the country, and then, of course, authors reflecting on what they're witnessing from the interaction from those that have previously lived here.